Hi friends. Hi friends. So I hope you all know me because I have been taking some of these classes since past couple of months. We have with us one of independent water consultant who primarily works in the area of water economics, Mr. Pawan Sachdeva with us. He is one of our IIT Kharagpur alums, and then right now he is working with several water utilities across different countries, primarily Asian countries. He has interest in research on urban water services. He is primarily focusing several Asian water utilities including Singapore, Malaysia, Cambodia, several Indian universities. So we welcome Mr. Sachdeva on this session.
Yeah, hello.
And
Yeah, thank you, Manoj. I'm glad to be with you and look forward to the session.
absolutely. Um, for me, you all know that I'm Dr. Manoj Tiwari. I work here at a School of Water Resources. I have been taking these online sessions, these NPTEL sessions since last couple of months. So we are up to your questions in this live interaction session. So please put forward your queries, your concerns, so that we can discuss those issues in general. To start with, we have received couple of questions earlier in the Google forum that we posted. So one says whether all state, central government body or sectors have appropriate awareness about water economics. If so, how much percentage they implemented in India till 2018? So this was questioned by Prashant. Okay. Well, to begin with, the status of awareness about water economics is very limited. It is very difficult to probably tell in terms of percentage. I guess Pawan will agree with me on that. It is very difficult to tell specifically in terms of percentage, like how much percentage awareness is there or how much is being, but barring a few major towns, okay, it is in general, particularly rural sector, we can leave totally, almost very little awareness. In the urban sector also, a few major towns are developing some pricing model, tariff structures, IBT systems that we discussed in our lectures earlier, but overall if you see the appropriate analysis of the economics of water services is still largely lacking, particularly with Indian water utilities. Pawan, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question that whether the decision makers in India understand the water economics concepts about water. I think they surely do know it theoretically at very top level, but when you go and speak with the organizations, I think they are more caught up in day-to-day activities and day-to-day challenges.
Exactly.
So if you have to give focus to this area, you have to think very strategically, and then the planning function within an organization also has to be a very strong function. So you have to see how many people they hire who are purely economists. So you'll hardly find anyone like that.
Exactly.
So you have to have people who can guide you through, this valuation. So I think we are far from what is an optimal situation in case of doing economic analysis in water utilities right now in India.
You raised a very important point. The people with appropriate capabilities are there in system or not. So if we see our like evolution of the water services in India, mostly post independence, you see the responsibility of supplying water has been given to the municipalities or PhDs, and the water division which takes care of this will have probably people from diploma or degree holders in engineering, okay, more so ever in the civil engineering and these kind of aspects. So their overall attention is to ensure that okay, the pipelines are laid, the people are getting water or not. The economics, because there is not that level of thinking in the system, there is a lack of those expertise in the system, so they never get the due attention.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Okay, there was another question on forum which was posted by Sarvanan. It is explain conflicts in water pricing. So this is again a very important and very good question in a way. When we talk about the water pricing, so of course we can consider water as a commodity service which is essential for life. So in order to, if we see the economic or financial aspects, we should allocate water or we should price water from where we are expecting maximum return. But then there are social sustainability concept is also involved, where as per the right to water which was accepted by UN, the water services should be made available to everyone at affordable prices. Now when we say that affordable prices thing, so then we are putting an upper cap for charging water, particularly for poor section, because for them affordability may not be the same as the person who is earning well can pay any price, any sustainable price, even financially sustainable price for water, and people are paying also. But when we look at the deprived section of the community, we have to ensure water services to them as well, but they probably may not be able to pay if we charge them on a the full cost recovery aspect. Okay, even if they are paying, that may not be very much very affordable to them. So that is one of the major conflicts in pricing water. This was in like United Nations has suggested that the total water charges in a month to a family should not exceed 3% of the household income. So if we follow that, or let us say approximately in that range, so we get like India, where there is so many people are below poverty line. If you see their household income, it is very less, and then if you see this criteria, so they will not be able to pay the appropriate prices. I think you have worked with several water utilities, Pawan, so you have better idea of how much cost incurs in just operation and maintenance of water services. Okay.
Right.
So in Chennai, probably because they have installed couple of desalination plants, so the water like the operation and maintenance of this desalination plant, so cost to the water per kiloliter is of the order of 50 rupees plus, right?
Right.
So now if you charge consumers based on that, so 50 rupees, even if you put it at 50, let's say, and a household which is using 20 kiloliters water in a month has to pay some 50 into 20, so 1000 rupees. Now for households which are who has monthly income of the order of, let's say, 3000, 5000, paying 1000 rupees for just water charges appears too high. So that is one of the major aspect, that how to make these things sustainable. Of course there are then concepts of subsidies and cross subsidies, charging other users higher in order to compensate this. These are one of the major conflicts. There are variety of other issues, okay, whether to regarding allocation of water. So in pricing, when you allocate water to the highly priced sector, like from industries, you are expected to get far higher tariffs as opposed to the domestic sector. So those kind of other conflicts are there. Pawan, what you suggest on this?
Thanks, Manoj. I think you covered a lot of ground on that. I will just take discussion to a different scheme of things, which is basically that whenever you take a policy decision, whether it's water pricing or anything, you try to focus on three parts. First is that it has to be an economically efficient solution.
Absolutely.
And then you talked about the social equity part. And the third part is it has to be an environmental sustainable situation. So when we talk about conflicts, we are talking about so far conflicts between some rich people or some people who can't afford water. But there is a conflict of water resource between humans and environment also. So you have to cost the environmental cost in pricing. So that's a conflict between human race and the environment.
Yes.
So how do you factor that? And we also know that the price elasticity of water, it's different for different consumption uses. So if you use it for drinking purposes, your price elasticity is close to zero actually, because you need it, right? But if you need to use water for your car washing and other thing, the price elasticity could be closer to -1. So the conflict is that there are different sectors, agriculture, commercial, industrial, and domestic. And within the domestic, there are like 8 to 9 different uses of the water. So the pricing cannot be one and all for everything. You have to have supply cost, you have to have economic cost, and you have to factor in the environmental externalities. So as we discussed in the first question, we are far from analyzing the total economic pricing of water. So the conflicts are not going to go away, they never go away, because this water is very sensitive to politics and to various users. So I think the best way going forward is how to move forward is to have people who can understand economics, and they are also part of the decision making, and also to have an independent economic regulator which can resolve these conflicts of pricing. Because right now the water utility which sells water, they only own the company, they only regulate it, and they only do everything. So there's no transparency on pricing. So how do you resolve conflict between a customer and a producer? So the structure of the industry or the water supply sector has to change. Thank you.
There is one of very active users on our forum, Suraj. So he has posted once that what are the possible current research areas in water economics and governance. So I would like you to basically talk on this, because you have like vast variety of experience working with several water utilities, you know ins and outs of the basic problems.
I think Suraj has asked a good question. I would say that first I will paraphrase that whatever research you do a research which is going to be actually beneficial to the system on the ground. So it's good to do PhDs and other research papers, but do something which is, my advice to Suraj will be, which helps the industry also. And from that regard, I'm sure you guys have discussed in the course, is that how important is the metering in India and anywhere in the world. And India is lagging behind in water metering so far. And because we have intermittent flows versus continuous flows in some other parts of the world, So you have to have a technology which is suited to the ground conditions, which can help people, which can help utilities measure the volumes. And so I think that research is lacking in India, the practical implications of having good metering and how to actually go forward with it. But India has scale, India has so many people. The current cost curve of any meter may look very high, but once you get into deployment of any new technology, the India can bring down the cost pretty significantly. Example is that the voice call rate in India was the cheapest in the world actually, because nobody thought before it came to India that voice can be so cheap, but it became cheap because you have so many people out here. And so the idea is you do a research, and the commercial aspect is also very big, but don't do pure research. On governance, I think a lot of people have written a lot of things. You can still choose to write something on few things, but my only suggestion would be do something which is more practice oriented than just theory oriented actually. So go and do an internship with a water utility. Suraj, I'll advise, and people like Suraj, that go and figure out for yourself from them that what research they need actually. We need not do a very high end kind of a work. We may need to do work which ultimately benefits the society.
Right. So apart from like metering, particularly if we see the our own country, there is a lack of the information at basic level how the utilities are faring. So the first thing in order to like conduct any research or survey would be exactly finding out the base level where we are standing.
Yeah,
So
that's a very good point. Yeah, go ahead.
even that kind of analysis, and it is a
Right.
like sort of very big task. It's not an easy thing to do.
Right. I think it's a very good point. The If you look, we talked about in your first question. You talked about that the responsibilities of water services is with now urban local bodies because of the 74th constitutional amendment. But and they are supposed to have their financial accounts available on their websites.
Right.
And I think the efforts are being made right now, but the transparency of financial accounts being available and other data being available, it's improving, but it can improve a lot. So somebody can do baseline. If you don't have baseline data, it's very difficult to solve a problem.
Baseline assessment.
First, you have to know the size of the problem to solve it. So that's where the research is required to be done.
There was another question that if water rights does not mention division of water within countries, even if any country lacking the water resources, so then ethically can this be like insensitive for countries to not providing water to other countries which are lacking in terms of water resources?
Yeah, I mean,
Or
like,
is
right.
there a like international agreement on under right to water, a country is forced to share its water resources, its own water resources, not the transboundary one. For transboundary resources, of course, there is a right of all the nations which are under that basin, so they can have a treaty or they can have an agreement. But if there is a, let's say, independent resource in a country, and that country may have the abundant resources, so internationally, how a country which is deprived of water resources can put pressure onto them for sharing their water resources?
Yeah, I think it's a good thought, but overall, if you look, like, water is a very um, it has, people generally don't like to share the local communities, even socially or culturally. Even if you look like a very commercial good like a gas in Europe in the last week, so Russia cut gas supplies to Ukraine, even on the pricing issues. and it's such a high-end commercial product. And water, there are not many. I can't think of an example when you can't anyway force another country to share what is there. So actually, it belongs to nature, but that's how things are. So you can't really put pressure. In water, at least transboundary, you have like Mekong River Commission and other commissions. You have tribunals, but it's very difficult. I don't see it's possible. However, in good sense, we want to try it. I think there are far bigger problems on the head of the governments right now.
Right. So that's what my perception was also there. That for transboundary rivers, it could be like possible, but for independent water resource, there is no mandation even under the right of water to water to share their resources.
Right. Actually, there is nothing called like, strictly speaking, an independent water resource, because water is a system. So it's part of one water balance, because even if you have a lake that is getting fed by some other surface water.
The conventional practice, as you see, so we have the basins for each water resource. Like for example, this the recent Supreme Court judgment on this Kaveri. So they considered Bangalore to be fed with the Kaveri. However, significant part of the Bangalore city is considered out of the basin. So there has been issues and raised onto that why Bangalore, the entire of the Bangalore city is being considered to be fed by the Kaveri river, even after, despite of being outside the basin of the Kaveri itself.
Right.
Achha, so we have another question. Should privatization in the field of water economics and governance help in quality and pricing?
I think, should I take it?
Yeah, you can answer.
I think the debate about private and public should come after whether first in the sector we have a regulation. Like, because you have to regulate the asset and you have to regulate the industry first. And before even private sector comes, there has to be a situation where information sharing in the society or in the sector is of a higher order. So unless those conditions are met, getting private sector in is very difficult. And because usually private sector is seen with a lot of suspicion, but the private sector wants and has to make profit to have a return on capital. Else, what's a public good and what's a non-economic good? Rather is when there is a profit motive, that only will drive the private sector investment. And when we read economics, we look at the social surplus is the surplus of consumers and the supplier surplus. So society gains if both have surplus. But we have got into habit of looking at private sector with a very negative negative view. The society thinks that the private sector is come for an extortion rather than adding value. So private sector, can they add value? They can add value if they are regulated well. And usually private sector will be driven for profits, so they will cut costs, which is good thing, which could be bad thing also. Because if you could cut too much of cost, it could hurt you in the long term. But if you don't cut, nobody can tell from outside. So there's never going to be a steady state situation where you are acting perfectly. But is there somebody to look that you are acting at least closer to what is required? So the answer to the question is, important thing is to have a regulator, economic regulator. And before that, before economic regulation comes, there has to be a habit of having a transparent mechanism. And before that, you should have enough leverage in the system where you can generate information. So the sequencing is very important. First, that the ability of the system to generate baseline data. Second is the transparency of that data. Then you benchmark different utilities without regulation, which is called a yardstick competition.
Right.
Then you have regulation, regulator out there. And then you think about private sector. And also in the private sector, if you look at overall assets of water distribution value addition, there is a water treatment plant and then there is a distribution. And in between there is, transmission of water pipelines. So transmission of water pipelines is 70 to 80% of your asset value. If you include sewerage also. If you only include the drinking water, it's not that high. So people think that wherever there is less monopoly, you can have private sector. So private sector can come into BO contracts for water production. Even if you have time, I can elaborate on one example in Ho Chi Minh city little later.
Absolutely, please.
So I mean, like in Ho Chi Minh city, the private sector has come. There are three parts to the water sector, right? The production, the transmission, and the distribution. So they have privatized the production part of it, and they have privatized the distribution part of it. So from very financial viewpoint, it looks very good because the production can be done by a private guy and they can supply you, and distribution can be done by a private sector and they can do it. Whereas overall you control the total transmission. But that brings in the issue of coordination, pressure optimization in the network, distribution, information sharing, which takes time. So the patience is there, but usually if you have to privatize, you should, I think, not privatize the distribution. First start with the production, because the capital gets free for you to invest in other places. Yeah.
So, add to that, actually, like when you say that we look at private sector with little suspicion in India, okay, but again we look at private sector with little suspicion in terms of in terms of concept that they are here to profit making. So the values or the cost will increase, okay, or the tariff or the prices will increase. So of course privatization for the reduction of the pricing looks little dicey. However, for service improvement purpose, we trust more onto the private sector as opposed to the government sector, because the general perception among Indian residents, most of the Indian residents, are that the government owned system or government managed system does not work that properly or that good as the private sectors. So the idea of improvement of the quality of services, of course more people can prefer private sector over government sector, but then the cost part or this thing, of course there would be, if you make it open, if you have competition and this thing, there should not be like one single big player from the private sector, because then monopoly comes into the picture. So all those aspects has to become, and the point that you raised of independent regulator is probably of most importance here, because the water is not something like for profit making purpose. So we have to look at other things, and it's eventually the responsibility of the state to ensure the water services available to their residents, or so in that aspect I think the regulator should have some say from the state as well, not only like having just of course regulatory body involving different stakeholders would be probably serve the best purpose, because it can have input and feedback from a requirement of all different players, the operator, the consumer side also, okay, what is the expectation from the consumers, what is the expectation of the government.
Right, that's very true. That's very true.
Okay, we have another question from Mr. Kalyan. So says that, can you please shed light on policy level changes for ensure water pricing its implementation in a national level?
So water is Kalyan, right?
Yeah, Kalyan.
Yeah, thank you, Kalyan, for your question. So, so water is first a state subject, so it's not a national subject. So we have water national policy of 2012, and in theory, everybody says that you have to have full cost recovery,
Right.
you know, and
So
everything.
role of central is probably limited to
Limited,
the
yeah.
dispute management
Right.
and those kind of issues only.
Right. So we should always, Kalyan, when we ask this question, we should always look 2-3 levels of way the decision making happens in the industry or in the sector. Is that legislative has put what conditions for water? Like legislative is your Vidhan Sabha and its center is your parliament overall. And after what regulatory institutions are there to convert that legislation into ground reality? You know, somebody to protect water pricing, somebody to protect, you know, consumers overall, whether those kind of regulatory institutions exist or not. So the progression to that is very slow at state level. And the prime example is that if you go to any state, the water portfolio in the ministries is not seen as a very great portfolio.
Right.
You want finance, you
Yes,
want
yes.
home, but in this country, even at central level, you I think need probably the best man at water, or even at a state level. So from political viewpoint, there is a very clear understanding the services have to improve, and I think lot positive is being done in India from federal level. Amrit program is an excellent work which is being done. Whether it can be done better, sure, everything you can improve. So we come back to the same thing again, you know, that at very top level you have to have an economic pricing, economic understanding, and not just the political part of it. Because if you take at policy level, 3 things are important: economically efficient, socially equitable, and environmentally sustainable. But if we give only weight to social equity part and without being equitable, because you can prove, this session is too short, that when you don't, and I've seen in Professor Manoj's slides also, actually if you don't charge water according to the price, the cost, the poor only suffers. Nobody else suffers actually. Nobody else suffers because rich, for them it's not even like 1%. We talk about World Bank says, UN says, sorry, 3% of the total income and everything. The only person who suffers is the poor guy only. And I think there's a very beautiful slide in Professor Manoj's handouts where the cartoons are shown, right? That we have never benefited from, you know, price drop actually. So it is that more realization has to go to consumer bodies that price hike is good for us. And one good way to do is that you start transparently sharing the
Total financials.
total cost, total financial. If you go to the quality of bills abroad, and they say in the bill that my price is 100 and the cost of water is 300, so I am paying you 200 subsidy. So people get at least the information sharing, and this was done in Jodhpur. You know, if you look at
Actually,
the
I shared some of those bills
Right.
thanks to you from your lecture only.
Right, yeah. So that way you
Yeah.
build some, and it can be done. I mean, like Prime Minister Modi did a fantastic thing. He asked people to give up LPG subsidy if you don't need one.
Right.
And you can do it in water also. Why you can't? I think we can move to the next question. Yeah.
So next question is by Lakshmi Priya, which is a very specific question: the difference between percolation and seepage. So this, although I explained this in forum as well, this question was earlier raised in forum. So see, the seepage is the flow of water through pores or through cracks where water may or may not find a place to exit. So we have, let's say, dam. If there is a crack in the retaining wall, so water seeps through that crack and comes out. There is nothing to do with the subsurface flow here. That is a seepage. we have water which is undergoing in the subsurface flow. It is basically going through the pores available in the soil. That is also seepage. Okay, the water is seeping through, it is not coming out. However, this particular phenomena of water going to the subsurface, going to the aquifer level through these pores or through these soils is also referred as percolation. So, that way seepage is a much more general term. Percolation can be considered probably as a subset of seepage, okay, where specifically for percolation essentially means water is going into the subsurface, going through your soil pores and this going downward and probably going up to the water table, up to the aquifer level. So, that is essentially what is percolation of water, okay, which is related. There is another term, infiltration. So, infiltration is the surface water when it basically infiltrates, it actually crosses that boundary and moves downward. So, that is infiltration. Crossing a boundary of surface water going down is infiltration. Then the water that infiltrates eventually percolates to the subsurface water reserves, which is aquifer or water table, whatever you can say, and there are then specifically like all this process is could be covered under seepage. However, more prominently seepage is often used when you see something coming out. So, even if the let us say we have let us say mines, okay, where there is a large degree of excavation takes place, and if you cut on the groundwater table, so the groundwater which is under the subsoil eventually comes out in the mine. So, that is also seepage, okay, when the this kind, because of the gradient water is coming out. Then as I gave earlier, gave the example of dam, so that is also seepage. So, generally seepage is more common term because the water is eventually can be seen outside coming. So, it is typically referred as seepage. The percolation is more scientific words, which is specifically for the study of water flow through the pores into the subsurface.
Okay.
Then Pawan has another question: how to separate the politics from water?
Okay. Hello, Pawan. Hi from Pawan here. So it's a very tough it's a tough question, how to separate politics from water. If you ask me, can you do it in the short period of time? I don't think so. My honest answer will be you can't do it.
No, but before you answer, just I'd like to add one point. Is it fair to like separate the politics totally from the water services? Is there no role of like political structure?
I think there is. The constitution says that for everything in which is to do with living,
Exactly.
the governance has to be involved. Government has to be involved in it. I think the way the question is aimed at the very narrow politics.
Right.
For politics, the aim of the governance is to protect the consumer's interest. But what is intended in the question is the aim is to protect the interest of the political party.
Parties, right.
It's not.
So
I understand what way you mean politics and what is made. I think world over people have moved and changed in water sector when you hit a crisis. So and India is probably waiting for a big crisis for things to change, and that is how will be a trigger when people will realize that this is not helping the matter. And we have discussed.
We are already having in bits and pieces probably.
Yeah, so that realization will come.
Last year,
yeah.
Maharashtra, we see the Latur
Yeah.
and what
Yeah,
was
I mean,
the
like,
state.
So when it will become big enough, then but that will
Like
be pretty.
now the whole world is talking about the Cape Town. water crisis.
Right, right, right. So I mean, if you go back to history of England and UK, you know, they came up with one big regulation in 1963, which was their abstraction law, when they restricted the abstraction by different entities, and that was on back of a very big dry period in 1959, and then a floods in 60s actually. And Australia has done tremendous amount of good work because they see anyway such big dry spells. Well, I think the way to look at it is that you increase the transparency from the utility side, and the way you can actually stop politics. One practical way of doing that is that if the leaders or the CEOs of water utilities stay on their seat for 5 years, rather than they change every 6 months. So if somebody is heading a water utility for 5 years, then he can or she can pitch the issues with the government much more with conviction. But if I come to the seat and I am going to get transferred in 6 months and maximum 1 year, I have very little incentive to fight for the financial sustainability of that company overall. So I think there are few moving parts to solve that problem, and it's a real tough one.
Right. So we have another question from Pallavi Kulkarni. So she has asked how much is charged per unit of water in different cities of India like Mumbai and Pune, and then is the water for domestic uses is charged differently in rural and urban areas. So I think in rural areas there is in fact the water coverage itself is not there, no pipe supply in a large part of the rural areas. Very few, very limited villages you will see that there is a piped water supply or there is village scale centralized water services. So when you do not have such services, the first place there is no question of charging. Further in urban areas, of course the prices are very different. Even in a city you will see the prices are different. Okay. And then metros, particularly in Mumbai and Pune, there are some sectors which are having fully metered supply lines. So for them utility is charging on a IBT structure based on consumption and this thing. However, again in the major cities also significant part of the cities are still not properly metered or not properly connected in a proper manner to the utility. So Pawan, you have worked with a lot of urban water utilities in India. So
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. First, I'll take the rural one. Once I had done a study in Soda village in Rajasthan. So because you have to look from village, there are like 10 to 12 hamlets which exist in a village. So one hamlet did have the pipe supply water, and I tested the water quality that time in that village, and they were getting very, very good quality of water. So that is adding value to people out there, and whether it was priced or not, I don't think so it is priced there. But coming back to urban thing, I'll give a specific example of Chennai. Chennai actually, they installed meters some time back, but there's no, the consumption meters not in all the households, but few households they had installed few years back. But you'll be surprised to know that in Chennai the water tariff is fixed at 50 rupees per household per month. So this is like one of the largest metro in India.
And probably one of the costest production.
Yeah, historically it was. So this
Because
comes a question of the marginal costing versus the average costing, and why actually you have to move toward marginal costing. You can't stay at average cost. So the cost of water production there, my suspicion is it's close to 25 rupees overall right now, and when that's on average basis, and this is before your NRW and UFW. And when you have 50 rupees for desal and desalinated water, and you still have high losses, so your effective cost is much higher. So the pricing in Chennai, I think, really needs to move to volumetric, but then you need metering. So you have to go for metering. Then people say, oh, we have like flat terrain in Chennai, so we find it very difficult to do metering. So you have to substantiate, as I said, with research, what is the problem. And if you go to New Delhi and if you go to Bangalore, the tariffs are, I think, pretty. They are pretty respectable in the sense they have changed it. They can be changed more now because of the incremental IBT. You know, the higher categories are paying, but are tariffs reflecting the cost of water? Surely not. I mean, like it is not, and you also have to recover. Whatever is your marginal cost of investment, whatever is going to be your marginal investment. So if you guys are interested, you should go and read 2010 McKinsey report on urban India, and it talks about from 2010 to 2030, India needs a capital expenditure of $180 billion in water sector, which is far higher than what India is spending. And I think 180 billion number itself is a very understated number by McKinsey. And how are you going to recover? So pricing is, yes, it's still low, and we'll come back to the same circle, you know, that whether politics should go out.
Further, there is one more point is whatsoever is the price, what is the collection system and collection efficiency. That is because I will give you an example of my own colony in Lucknow, where my hometown is. So there it's unmetered connections to all households, and tariffs are fixed at 200 rupees per month. Till date, nobody has got any bill. Okay. Now we because know that, and we have while taking this thing handover of the house from Awas Vikas, we had that agreement. So on every 6 months we sort of submit a check of 1200 rupees, but most of the households are not paying anything because they are not getting any bill.
Right. That's a very good example.
So after maybe after 5-10 years, if somebody some authority comes and asks them to recover all the amount, and then they will suddenly send bills of 1,000 to the household, and then they will probably be reluctant to pay that much amount.
Right, true. That's a problem.
And city-wise, of course, the prices to the original questions, of course, the prices vary a lot. They are not same. So like in Chennai, you gave example, Delhi up to 20 kiloliter is free, and then beyond that there are charges which are different. Will be that in Mumbai, Pune or Nagpur or Jamshedpur. Calcutta, again, part of the Calcutta gets free water.
Right.
While other part they pay some amount.
Like in Bangalore, you have the least one place 7 rupees, and then the next category is 11, then 25, and then 46. So those numbers are available in Manoj's slides also.
Some of those existing tariff structures has been shared earlier. Lakshmi has another question. What is the difference between physical water scarcity and economical water scarcity? So physical water scarcity, of course, when there is limited water availability, limited resources available. So we know that if we go by the international norms, if the per capita annual availability of water is less than 1700 meter cube, so this much amount per person, 1700 meter cube of water per person. If your resources has water less than this, you call that a water stressed region. If that availability has fallen less than 1000 meter cube, we call that a water scare region. So physical water scarcity is basically the lack of availability of resources, in physical terms. So if there is no water resources available, of course the region is under water scarcity, because you will not be able to get water. The economical water scarcity, I think Pawan would be better to answer this.
No, I mean, like I'm hearing this term honestly for the first time. Okay. The physical and the environmental scarcity. The way I understand
this, it's economical.
Economical scarcity.
Economical scarcity.
Okay. So I mean, like the way I understand is that the water has different economic costs and benefits for different sectors, and we are looking at, if you look at agriculture or industrial or industrial, so there is always an opportunity cost for not using. If one sector uses it, then the second sector, is deprived of it. So you have to account for the opportunity cost. So I think all these concepts, if water is priced economically on the cost side and on the benefit side, that will, I think, means the part about the economic scarcity or not. But I'm honest, I don't know what the question is about, so I have no answer.
It will probably also be the ability of getting water based on the economics involved. Even if water are available, physically available, but you do not have appropriate uh, like financials or appropriate budget available.
Sure. Yeah, it could mean like that, yeah.
Okay. Another question is by Kalyan again. So he has asked, is there any pricing system in India where the entire capital costs are recovered by pricing strategy, and how much emphasis is laid on the recovery in India? So this more or less we have been discussing in few other questions also. The pricing system in India with entire capital cost recovery, I don't think there is any.
None.
Absolutely no.
I think maybe Nagpur may be getting closer to it, but I don't know. But other places, I don't think so.
Nagpur is also, I think, O&M recovery is what.
Yeah, I'm saying even if
at present utilities are targeting.
Yeah.
The capital recovery or capex
No.
investment is probably none.
None.
Yes. And then there is how much emphasis is laid on recovery in India? Well, that's again because it's subject to utilities.
Yeah, it's not fair to comment
Yeah.
on every utility from here.
And it's like whosoever is the like top authority of the utility, what's their priorities, how much they are willing to recover, what kind of things. So
Yeah,
the
right,
degree of
right.
priority is different.
Right, I can give you one anecdote. I was somebody from Hyderabad was in Singapore recently, and as you rightly said on the personality. So one lady boss came there, and she has driven everybody crazy in one particular part of Hyderabad, and recoveries are like very, very nicely done there. So it depends on the drive of the person.
Right. There is a question that India has accepted the right to water in 2010-11. That means state should follow this, and at last it is prime responsibility of local government to provide water and sanitation facilities to all, but most of them are failed to do so. Local authorities are not very serious about this. They don't pay much attention on this. How to make them more responsive and accountable is the big question. So can any like
Right. So
jurisdictional action be taken? Those kind of question appeared in forum from others as well.
I think first of all, I have fundamental difference with the way the term right to water is defined, even by UN. Actually, humankind has no right to water more than the other species. Actually, we are just, if you look from the perspective that we have right to borrow water from environment, and we have to return it to the environment. If you looked at it from that perspective, then things will become simpler in understanding the economic and the environmental cost and the pricing of water and everything, which will mean that people should get free water. They can get free water, but people, if they pollute water, they have to give back pollute water. It has to be clean. So everybody has to pay for that. So there's a cost of transporting water. So the right is is one part of it. Second part is of the responsibility. You can have a right, but equivalent has to be responsibility. So the society cannot say that, oh, the government is not giving me, because government doesn't have resources. Government has limited, if you read economics, or there's an opportunity cost for everything. If government gave everything to everyone, then there is going to be a shortage of resources. And water has to be given to everyone, don't get me wrong. The lifeline water government has to give to everyone, of whether it's 7 meter cubic per month for per household, or 20 as in Delhi. But the key question is whether it's practically feasible in the short time to do it. It's not. It's not. I mean, like UN can say right to water, but eventually it will not happen in 3 to 5 years. Whether we should put enough pressure on government to do it, yes, I think much more from public to on the government, that we surely need smart city, but we first need basic infrastructure. So it's a long haul, and you cannot. Yeah, I mean, like we cannot say we have to like it's our right only. We have our responsibility also, and towards other species also, because it may look very funny that why we are talking about environment when humans are not getting, but world population has increased from 1 billion to 7 billion in 250 years only. So we have to think first that everything will not be solved by government. That's one myth, that all problems will be solved by government. Government cannot solve. We have to solve ourselves. So right has to come with responsibility. So we should not cite only the right to corner the government and say, oh, you have not given me because UN has told, because that's not a right thinking.
No, add to that, like that's very interesting observation, that it should not be right to water, but right to borrow water from the environment. Okay, that concept was I appreciate really. But when we say that we cannot say that government is responsible for providing water. See, the water resources, whatever is available, is the government is the major controller of that, right? They have the authority on those water resources. So now when the water, they have the authority, so it's their responsibility when we accept, let's say, an international agreement or those kind of thing. So it becomes the responsibility of the government whatsoever level. Okay, of course, because it is as per Indian constitution, it is in the purview of the local government. So it becomes the responsibility of local government to harness those resources to whatever degree available, because anyway people are getting water either here or there, somewhere, either abstracting groundwater, because if you do not provide them, they will find their other ways. Okay. So harness those resources in the more sustainable manner, because of course if you leave it to individuals, their approach may not be that sustainable as opposed to the approach adopted by the government in consultation with the right people with the right expertise. So with those, like government has this responsibility of harness those resources and provide the water and sanitation services to all. Okay.
Right.
Unfortunately, we do not have any sort of judiciary control on that. Okay. We cannot hold these local authorities responsible for that. Okay. So there has to be like those accountability issue. We are limiting with the time, so we will take one more question.
Sure,
last question. That is again about in Karnataka, more than 90% of habitations, especially rural, depends upon groundwater and are facing major risk of depletion of the resources. What is the solution for this type of problems? So this was question by Praveen.
So I mean, like it's very difficult to answer this kind of question in last 2 minutes. All I'll say is that it starts with how you price electricity, and then that will have an impact on how much groundwater you can withdraw, because there's no other way you can price groundwater because you don't have any control on volume which people abstract out of that. So if you know that a pump is in an operation somewhere and it needs electricity to run, you increase the electricity price there. So the people will become, more, the price elasticity will come to use it more efficiently actually. And price elasticity concept has to be understood very carefully in water. Whereas the price elasticity of water is, less, but if water is coming at a low price and the leakage is happening, that doesn't come as part of your consumption. That just goes as your wastage.
Right.
So wastage, the sensitivity to wastage is very high, right? If your pricing goes up. So I think the practical way of doing it would be to hike electricity charges. But if you have to just talk theoretically in policy level, we can say go and do this and that. But one easy step would be to price electricity selectively for people.
Particularly, again, the higher slabs of the electricity consumption.
Yes.
Because,
Then you have to have the benchmark. What is your field size? What is
Right.
what if you need this field? Your water consumption should be 20, and you are actually using 40. Because I can make it out with electricity consumption of yours. I need not go to you and ask you for your water consumption because you won't share that data with me.
Right. And there has been some like jurisdictional precedences on this, that the authority of abstraction of even groundwater is limited till you do not cause depression in the groundwater in some other's field.
Right.
But monitoring of these things is very
Yeah.
difficult, practically impossible.
Yeah, practically impossible.
You, like somebody cannot have the groundwater level monitors so that one can tell, oh, my groundwater level is dipping because of he is pumping.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll add just last point on this is that usually when we talk about water regulation and everything, we miss one part in our discussion is that all laws are actually enforced, whether groundwater you can be allowed to extract or not. The local police has the maximum power. Actually, all the enforcement is done by them.
Absolutely.
If you can make them happy, and then you can have a bore well at your home in Delhi, or you can have it in any field, then you can make any policy.
Right.
But enforcement is, police is as much a part of water governance than talking about regulator and other people. You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So with this, I think we can conclude this session here. Okay. Still, those who have some more questions can leave it on the forum, and we'll try to answer the questions there. I'll try to engage Pawan in the loop from now onwards, particularly for this purpose. And I thank him a lot for joining us on this opportunity. And I hope that the participants or those who have attended have got some of their queries answered. Okay. It's just not answering the questions, it's just like putting thoughts for
Right.
discussion and for research, initiation of work, all those things.
Right. Thank you, Manoj,
So-
and thank you all the participants, Kalyan, Pawan, and everybody out there, and wish you best of luck. Thank you.
Thanks.